So in this webinar, I really want to look at technologies to help us monitor the health of our System Center Configuration Manager 2007 clients. Because it's typically a big issue that people are concerned about. Well, I'm doing a lot of things with my SCCM infrastructure, patches, app deployment, OS deployment, inventory. But if my SCCM client's not healthy, if they're not talking to SCCM, then I'm obviously not performing any of those functions. And there's a lot of things we can do to troubleshoot clients. I mean, there's a lot of logs we can investigate. However, there's two technologies that can actually be used to very quickly give us a good idea of how healthy our SCCM clients are without really us having to do a lot of work. So I just wanted to cover those. Now, the first one is actually, it's been around since SCCM 2007 R2. And you can actually find it in a folder. Client status reporting on your R2 or your R3 media, and you install this, and what it actually does is it installs an additional service onto your machine. This client status reporting, I'll just start it now quick. So what you do is you run it and it'll install this service. And then to actually configure it, it also installs a configure client status reporting. And what this component is actually doing is it's going and talking to your SCCM database in your environment. You give it credentials on who that service account is going to run as. So I'm just running it as the local system account because I've actually installed this on my main SCCM site server. But you can say, hey, go and check, as the client reported, its heartbeat within 7 days, software, hardware inventory, status messages, policy requests, i.e. how frequently are the clients talking to our infrastructure. And you might need to tune these values depending on what you've configured your agents to actually perform these checks on. It can also update the Configuration Manager database with information this finds. You can actually make it, hey, check the policy request information from the management point on how often the client should be checking in. And if there are inactive clients, either not talking to SCCM, you can actually tell it, we'll try and ping them. Are they even on the network? And you can make it run now, or you set the schedule of how often it's going to do that. Is it for the entire SCCM hierarchy or just this particular site? And there's just information. So you run this thing. And what you actually do is, once it's up and running, it adds 6 new reports. And you'll see them as client status. Now, it doesn't add them in automatically. What you're going to actually need to do is import objects. You navigate to the C program files, x86, the 64-bit, Microsoft Config Manager Client Status Reports folder, and there's the client status reports.mof. So we're going to open that and import it, and that contains those 6 reports. So you would then proceed, click next, and then click finish. I've already imported them. So then they're available to you. And obviously if you're running reporting services as well, you can copy the reports to reporting services. So then they'd be available in your SQL reporting services infrastructure. So you would then select those reports. So I would unselect them all. I just want to copy my client status over to my SQL reporting services. And then once you've got them, you run them. So you can get a client status summary, which will just give me basic information about what's going on in my environment, or give me information about ones that have failed. So these are inactive, run this report. Just leave it blank, other all site codes. And then it quickly gives me information about, well, this machine, hey, it's offline, it's not pingable. the last DDR, never had a successful hardware, software or ping. Hey, but this box, DPM01, it's not had a hardware or software scan, but hey, I can ping it at least. So it's giving me some information about the clients that are failing. So these reports, I mean, it's that quick to get this up and running, and it really does give you some pretty useful information about the environment. So that's one thing, that's in the box, part of R2 and above. You just install it and then it gives you access to these nice new reports. So the other thing is the Configuration Manager dashboard. And this is actually something that Microsoft released a while ago. Let's just jump over. So it's the Configuration Manager dashboard, and it sits on top of Windows SharePoint services. So what we are going to need now is a Windows Server running Windows SharePoint services, or the Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007. So we download this Configuration Manager dashboard, and if you've not already got Windows SharePoint services running, you would download Windows SharePoint Services 3, currently with SP2, and that does install on 2008 R2 64-bit, obviously, which is what I'm running it on here, and you need to enable the .NET Framework feature. So for example, if you don't currently have this set up, you would download this and download the Configuration Manager dashboard on my file server. All you literally have to do is enable the .NET Framework feature and then run that Windows SharePoint Services installation. So under my features, you can see I enabled the .NET Framework. There, that's the one you need. Then you install the Windows SharePoint Services, and then you install the Configuration Manager add-on. Now when you install that Configuration Manager, it actually adds a new site with this port of 12345. Easy to remember, the same as my PIN from my bank accounts. I'm lying, it's only 1234. But we now have this new interface. If we just go home, it comes with this information configured straight away. So it gives us information on software update management, software deployment. This is about us doing anything. One thing I will just point out, if you access, this is one I've custom added, and I'm going to walk through this in a second. If you want to access it from another computer, you are going to have to add a firewall exception, because normally HTTP uses port 80. So this SharePoint site is port 12345. Actually, I use administrative tools. Windows Firewall Advanced Security, inbound rules, and you actually say I already created it here. But essentially what this rule does is it's for a particular TCP port, and notice I've got 12345 in there. So I'm allowing inbound requests to port 12345. You notice I've also got 1202, that's the administrator connection for the regular SharePoint site. So I just added that into the same rule. But you need to make sure you add a firewall exception for TCP port 12345. And then that's going to let you externally access that SharePoint page. So, back to my external web browser. You can see I've got a pretty arrow glass, and I can access that. So I do a refresh, so I've got that firewall exception, I can talk to it. So we get these as default. This just comes out the box, and it's giving us some basic information. Microsoft have actually done a series of blog entries that actually talk about extending this, because one of the great things about this dashboard is it's highly extensible. And you notice here it's got a client count, and this is part 4. There's other ones that give you other customizations, but I'm caring about client health. And what it does is it gives you a screen of what they want you to create, and then the SQL command to actually get the information out of SQL that can then populate these counters. So you can see I've actually already done it for this first one, and it shows me, hey, percentage wise I've got this nice little gauge. But I mean, let's pretend I hadn't done it. So what we're going to want to do is we're an administrator, we're going to do edit page, and the first thing it actually has in this edit page is a hidden component. and this is our dashboard configuration. So the first thing we do, so if we look at what they've given us, they give us a name and they give us the SQL code we require to get the right information. So I'm going to give it a name. Let's call it client invent count, and it's going to be a .xml. I don't need a hyperlink or URL. So the data set, so I need the name of my database. So this is default instance, so I'm just going to give it the name of my database. My SCCM database is called SMS Lab, and then the SQL query. So at this point I'm just taking this, I'm going to paste it in. I don't need the go command. I'll paste that in. I can do a parse to make sure it's legal, and then validate, and it'll actually show me, hey, this is the output that it's going to give me. I can then actually say, okay, well, I want bits of information on my page, so I want a gauge. And the first one, if I look at the picture they have, is, okay, client percentage with hardware inventory. Okay, so we'll give it client percentage with hardware inventory. I'll have it linear. I'm looking at hardware percentage. I want it greater than or equal to, well, if I look at theirs, they're basically saying 75 is good. So I'll make mine 75 as well. The scale can start at 10, which is what they have theirs at. And that's good. Then we add the other one, make it linear again. This time it's going to be client percentage with software inventory. Software percentage greater than or equal to 75, scale starts at 10, and I'm done. And then we could carry on and we could add this data grid, but I've only got one site, so I guess I don't really care that much, but sure. We can add a data grid. What did we call it here? Client count with percentage lots. Client count inventory info. I'm lazy. So we can just call it site. And call it total active hardware success. Let's see where this is going. Software success. Hardware percent. And again, it's fully customizable. You do whatever you want in this. Microsoft's just giving you guidelines, and so am I. I'm just following what they've done. So now we're going to save it. So now I've got that XML file. So the next thing I need to do is, you notice down here I already added in this, I already created one, but without that chart. So what I can actually do, I'm going to take this one out. And we'll add a new web part. So what we're actually going to do now is a Microsoft dashboard viewer. So that bit at the top was the Microsoft dashboard configuration, the hidden bit. Now we need to add one to actually view what we just configured. So I'm going to add that in. Modify that shared web part. Now if I go over to the right, I can select that XML file. So client inventory count. You can specify the height, width, apply. And there's my web part. Okay. And I can exit edit mode. And now, bang, I've got that new bit here that quickly I can see my client percentage, my status, software and hardware inventory, and all my client counts. So that's just one of them. They give you a lot more. So there's ones about heartbeat, MP communications, client health problem management. So that's a nice one. So there's a tricky bit on this. So when you use these other ones, they have these custom message descriptions. Now, they are not part of the standard SCCM database. Basically, you have to go to this location here. Download this file, and then for me, I'm going to import it into my existing SCCM database. Generally, you shouldn't play around with your SCCM database. You can put this in a different database. It just complicates the SQL query. So what I'm actually going to do now is download this, and I'm going to jump back in time. I actually brought this in yesterday because I was playing around with the best way to do it. So I'm going to walk you through how you get this XLS file into your SQL database. So I'm just going to jump back to yesterday and walk you through doing that, and then we'll come back and actually use it. So now we're actually going to just import in the configuration manager error descriptions, which are used by some of the custom dashboard parts that we bring into SharePoint. So I downloaded the error descriptions from the website, as I talked about. So now I'm going to open them in Excel. Let's bring that over here. Now I'm going to have to make one change because I'm going to comma delimit this. I'm going to save it as a CSV, and we're going to use double quotes for if there's text that has commas in it. Well, the problem is they have double quotes in the file as well, which can cause some confusion. So what I'm actually going to do is quickly, anytime I find a double quote, I'm going to replace it with two single quotes. Lots and lots of times. Now I'm going to save this as a CSV, and that's it. Just click OK to all the messages. You're good. No. Now I have a CSV file. So I'm going to copy this over to my SQL server. What I'm now going to do is run DTS Wizard, and this lets you import and export data. So my data source here is actually going to be a flat file, and I'm going to select that CSV. It's delimited by the comma. I have a double quote is the text qualifier, and the first column represents the names of the data. Now I do need to make a change here. So we look at the columns, it's showing us the data, but by default everything is a varchar 50. Well, some of these are very long and don't fit, basically description and symbolic link name. So what I'm actually going to do is we can do suggest types. And that actually does a scan, and I'm going to say scan all 3,000 rows. There's like 2,870 rows in this thing, because near the end is some of the longest data. So I'm going to say scan that, and now it's actually, instead of 50, it's 78 for this one. That one's good, that was under 50. This one, much bigger, and those are all fine. So I'm going to click next. I want to read it into my SMS database. If I do edit mappings, it's going to show me, hey, it's actually creating the right sort of columns in SQL based on those source types that it auto ascertained. Click next. I'm going to run it immediately, and success. So we've now brought that into SQL. If I go to my SMS database and do a refresh, I should now see that config manager error descriptions, and I can actually now go and maybe select the first 1,000 rows, and then we can see it brought in the data. So we now have that data available to us in Configuration Manager, so we can use it in those custom web parts. Okay, so we saw how we brought that in. Hopefully that was useful. So now what I want to do is use that. So now I did call mine something slightly different. Because I imported in the XLS file directly, if I actually just try and jump to, this is the Microsoft SQL Management I've connected to my SQL Server, and I want to do a new query. If I type in that code, it's going to fail because this does not exist in my database. I called it the name of the file, which was config error descriptions. So I'm going to change that to config there. Now I should be able to run it. And I've only got one error in my environment, so not as exciting as the ones on their web page. Maybe we can find one of the other ones that's a bit more interesting. Client health status messages, that might be a good one. So again, I can just take this code, and again, anytime I see this, I have to change it. None in my environment. So unfortunately my environment's fairly healthy, which is not surprising since I've got hardly any machines in it. I haven't done any client. Oh, client error status messages. Let's have a look at this. I'm bound to have some errors on this one. You can see how easy it is. I mean, these are great for this dashboard, but I can just use them anyway. Okay, great. So I've actually got some errors. I should be that excited about that. But look, I've got counts of errors. So we can use this. We'll create another dashboard item for this one. So I'm going to keep that SQL handy. So going back to my web page, so this one's going to give us this nice client error status messages, and it's just a pie chart with then a chart. So back to my page again, site actions, edit page. It's going to bring up that configuration. So this one is client error status. 7 days, we'll call it. My data set again. Doing database. SQL query. Again, I'm just taking it straight from Microsoft, but so you can either choose to rename the database table to be the same as Microsoft's, or just make sure you update this name each time. So I'm going to jump over to here. That's my SQL. Parse it, validate it. That was good. So they had a pie chart, and their title was Top 10 Error Status Messages. And essentially what they're doing is a count. So I guess the legend will be message ID and the y-axis is count. And then data grid. So I've never actually tried this one before, so you may need to play around to get the right value. And the data grid is the actual exactly the same. And then we're going to add message ID, severity. Basically, we're just adding all of the data that's returned. The count, last occurred, hot spell, component, and description. I think it's the same as what they had. Oh, they didn't include component actually. So we could actually take that out as well then. So we'll take out component. They didn't have it. And we're done. So now again we're going to scroll down to the bottom and add that in. Add a web part. Microsoft Dashboard Viewer. Add in. There it is. Edit. Modify it. You're going to see the properties. Client error status 7 days. We can just leave that. So I had message ID. So what may have been more useful, I guess what they did. Oh, they did component, I'm assuming, up here. Okay. Yeah, they did client component. Oh, they did component at the start as well. So you can see my chart doesn't look exactly like theirs. So what we could actually do is do apply. See, they did component here instead. This way. So we'll just save that. And then it's updated already. So exit edit mode, and there I can see my top 10 client error status messages as well. And again, Microsoft have all these different ones that you can go and get, and they're constantly adding. You can create your own. We're just basically querying the SQL database, but you can see very quickly, and that was what, maybe half an hour in total spent on this, really from start to finish. You can see we have great functionality in basic just reporting now in Configuration Manager through that client status reporting, and through the dashboard we get some ones out the box about information about our environment, which is great, but it's so powerful to actually customize it. And again, they're publishing those customizations for us. You do need to import this in, as I showed you how to do, and then you can get really good information. I hope that was useful. I hope it gives you good insight into your SCCM client environment. Thank you.